Welcome to the Automation Village. Every 2 weeks, we bring you a tasty morsel of automation goodness. 2 weeks ago, Natasha Lutz showed you some of the highlights from last month's VT SCADAfest, which was a hugely successful software users conference that took place at the Loews Portofino Hotel Resort in Orlando, Florida. And 2 weeks before that, one of our in-house technical experts, Dan Naughton, told us about some interesting things that we might want to consider before we choose Linux as the operating system for a SCADA system. But this week we're going to talk about cybersecurity, specifically cybersecurity based around operators. Now maybe your utility or your organization isn't big enough to have a fully formed IT department, or maybe it's so big that your department's needs sometimes get lost. So today we're just going to focus on a handful of simple ways that you can actually improve the cybersecurity of you and your team without having to drag in anybody from IT. But first, we're going to bring in longtime Automation Village contributor Lee Kibler, and he's going to give us an update on a news story from a few months ago that you might recall regarding a cyber incursion at a small utility in the eastern United States. Now, you might know what I'm thinking of, but you probably don't know how that story ended. And for that, we go to Lee.
What do butterflies and water have in common? The butterfly effect is a theory of chaos, where a small infinitesimal change, i.e. the flapping of a butterfly's wings, can create a hurricane or a tornado on the other side of the world. This is where a small thing can happen and have a large outcome. That was unintended. In 2001, a small utility reported a cybersecurity intrusion where a set point was supposedly supposed to be 100 on an HMI, and it changed to 11,000. The operator swore that he saw the mouse move on the screen and the number changed. Well, this resulted in involvement in the news media, the FBI, Homeland Security. Legislators became involved. Federal legislation on cybersecurity was implemented. All kinds of consultants were hired. Evaluations for cybersecurity at the grassroots level at utilities happened across the country. And a great deal of anxiety occurred for our ratepayers and people that just want to make sure they have clean drinking water. Unfortunately, it turned out that it may have been a case where somebody embellished the truth. The FBI was involved, Homeland Security. They found that there was no proof that there was any cybersecurity incursion. Now, we look at this in retrospect, and all this evaluation and all these things that happened probably needed to happen anyway in our industry. But if we look at the very beginnings of the flapping of the wings at the local level, if we would have trained our operator how to properly run the HMI, would this have happened? If the integrator had have properly set up the ranging on the lye or the sodium hydroxide for pH adjustment, would this have even happened? If we would have not have had an open team viewer session allowed, would this have even happened? So as individuals, we need to evaluate what we do on a daily basis to make sure that we give our people the best opportunity to succeed. Thank you.
Thanks, Lee. Now, even though that story didn't turn out to be what we thought it was, the potential risk was absolutely real. And I think as a result of that incident, it sparked a lot of really awkward but really healthy conversations about how to eliminate some of these, shall we say, worst practices, specifically using a third-party screen sharing tool with a single user account for everybody to connect to their mission-critical SCADA system. Now, of course, speaking on behalf of our sponsor, VT SCADA, we of course recommend that you you would use something that has an integrated thin client functionality and of course set up proper user accounts. But let's keep talking about cybersecurity from the point of view of operators. Now, we hear a lot these days about how people are using social engineering in order to hack the humans involved in a system so that they can gain credentials to then basically attack the system itself. So let's focus on just a few simple strategies that you and your team can use to keep your system secure from these kinds of increasingly targeted attacks. Number one, email. We're all familiar with threats that come from emails. We know not to open the attachment. We know we shouldn't click that link. In the past, email attacks have been very broadly based, where they would write 1 million people and say, "Dear Chris," and another 1 million people saying, "Dear Nancy," on the assumption that at any given time, there's a fairly sizable number of Chris's and Nancy's who happen to be waiting for a package from Amazon and would be willing to click that link to find out where it is. But these days, these attacks are much, much more targeted. Now, it doesn't take very long to look on social media, to look on LinkedIn, and come up with an email that is targeted right at you that is very, very credible, that you might be convinced to click on or do the call to action if, again, you're in a hurry. So once again, stop, look, and smell. Now, there are lots of people out there who have already created videos about how to vet emails to make sure that it is for real. So I won't reinvent that wheel. I'll put a link to one of those videos in the description. But basically, take a good hard look at the email address. You might have to hover over it or right click on it in order to get a good look at it. Is it support at Google or is it support at Google? Does it all look correct except for some characters added on to the end? And if you want to be really sure, you can go into the properties, for example, in Outlook, and look at the header information, the meta information for the email itself. And there's all sorts of evidence in there that can give you a good sense. But usually it doesn't take long to figure it out. The trick is that we're in a hurry. It played on our expectations that we were going to get that email, and so we didn't think twice. So the most important thing, stop, and then make a decision. Next, set up an out-of-office plan. How many times have we heard of this, where somebody at a company gets a phone call or a text saying, "Oh, I'm the president of your company. Good to talk to you, Chris Little. I hear good things about you, but I'm in Bangladesh right now, and I lost my laptop, and I have to do a very important presentation, and I'm using my daughter's phone, and I need to get the password of the VPN. Can you get that for me?" Now, 9 times out of 10, you'll be able to know right away that's not the truth, but maybe again, the company is so large you wouldn't recognize what the president or the head of sales or someone who works in another region sounds like. And you don't want to leave it to that moment to decide how you're going to vet those people. So again, have a meeting, have a discussion, make a decision. What's the process going to be? Now, one useful thing is Teams. Microsoft Teams is a great example of a tool that you can use for everybody to be able to say when you're out of the office, say when you're going to be out, have an emergency contact number if we need to make sure that that's you who's contacting us, and or somebody else in-house who can handle any kind of business that comes in for you or from you. See something, say something. So here's another scenario. You have one of your suppliers or one of your partners write you and say, so I got this great email from your chief technical officer or somebody high up in your company, and they wanted to talk about this great opportunity, and we are really excited. We just don't want to sound stupid. Is this real? And of course, odds are it's probably not. This is a thing that's happening more and more. Again, credible sounding emails going out to the people outside of your company, claiming to be people inside your company. So when those things happen, obviously you can tell them whether it's true or not, but then make sure somebody knows. Make sure if you do have an IT person or an IT team that they know. If you have teams, you should probably have a dedicated Teams channel where people can share these things, because often when they happen to a lot of people at once to try to get in there before people get wise. So the faster people know something's up, the more likely they are to batten down the hatches. Can't touch this. That's what I call this section, which is something that we come back to over and over again. It's kind of an evergreen spear phishing strategy. Spear phishing being when, again, somebody is looking to get from you the information that they need, and they want to get it from you specifically, and they've targeted you, and they know where you live, and they know where you work, and they know where you shop. A little spooky. We all know that if you see a USB stick lying on the ground in the parking lot where you shop, leave it there. Or if you find a beautiful DSLR camera just sitting outside your building, you might not want to pick that up and plug that into your computer either. So again, we're distracted by a lack of time, by unreal urgency, but also sometimes by an alternate story. The story that, hey, someone lost their camera and they want it back. And we miss the real story, which is somebody's attacking our network. So here's version number 3. You come home and you find a drone, a nice looking drone with a camera on it, damaged and skittering around on the grass in your backyard. So again, you're distracted by the fake story, which is somebody was spying on you, and miss the real story, which is there's another SD card in that machine, and if you plug it into anything in your home, the attacker is one step closer to your network. Now, of course, this also is important that you make sure your family knows this. Other younger members of your family might be more eager to want to plug that drone into one of their computers, which is another thing to keep in mind. Never use your teenager's computer for anything. And finally, this one I call don't hold that door. And basically it means if you work in an institution that has security that requires a key code or a key card or an old-fashioned key, then you don't want to let anybody into that building. And again, it's called social engineering because the attackers want to play on our good natures. They want to play on how we like to work, and that is we want to trust people. We don't want to have an awkward conversation at the door where we say, no, I'm sorry, you can't come in, even though you're carrying a box. And even though I've struck up a conversation with you a handful of times at the coffee shop down the street, so I kind of know you. No, have the awkward conversation. Don't let that person in behind you to avoid a much, much more awkward conversation. Okay, that's it for this episode. Thanks for joining us. Thanks to Lee Kibler from Riviera for his great thoughts. Thanks to the rest of the Automation Village team, Keith, Natasha, Dave. If you're looking for a secure SCADA platform, you may be interested to know that VT SCADA recently received certification for IEC 62443 Maturity Level 2 for cybersecurity and its development process. And you can download the free version of that software in the link in the description. And we'll see you in 2 weeks in the Automation Village.